regular board meeting of the Park District of Highland Park at 6:05 p.m. on Tuesday, August 27th. Mitch, I read that.
Yeah.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Bernstein.
Here.
Commissioner Grossberg.
Here.
Commissioner Flores-Weiskopf.
Here.
Vice President Wettenberg.
I'm here too.
And President Captain will be arriving shortly.
Right. Excuse me. Are there any additions to the agenda from any of the commissioners? Hearing none. Public comment. Is there any public comment for items on the agenda? Oh, that's easy. We'll go on to the next item. The consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion about items on the consent agenda? Hearing none. Mitch, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein.
I is to A and B and D, E, and F, and I'm going to abstain to C because I was not at that meeting.
Commissioner Grossberg.
I'm in for A through F.
Commissioner Flores-Weiskopf.
Aye.
Vice President Ruttenberg.
Aye. The motion is carried. Thank you. We're going to defer the Rosewood Beach discussion for a little while, Margaret, until our president arrives. So could we go to the treasurer's report? Mr. Becker.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
Treasurer's report is before you. I did want to correct a couple of typos that appear on the notes to the district-wide report. That very first sentence where it says, despite slightly underperforming as compared to budget, it should be despite slightly underperforming district-wide as compared to budget, and that basically refers to the anticipated deficit of $343,000 for July specifically, and the $393 that actually happened. And then the comment, the next part of the next sentence about the recreation fund, that should read 115 instead of 130. And then in the next sentence, on a year-to-date basis, the district is operating well ahead of 2019, not 2018. So I
Great.
apologize for all of that.
So why are the figures off like that? Like they're literally typos, or we
Those
estimated-
are my errors. They're just simply typos. I left out a word. I typed in 19. It wasn't created by software.
Okay, it wasn't. No, I didn't mean the word typos. The numbers. Those are just not that we didn't meet a certain amount.
No,
it's
no,
just,
no.
Okay.
It's just to help.
Change. Okay.
The two things that I do want to point out about the financials for this month are, in doing our budget projections, we noticed that we had failed to reverse the accrual for interest income for 2018, so we're going to be doing that in August. So that'll make those numbers look a little bit different. Again, it's just a correction of an error. The good news is that I believe that the IMAT situation is coming to an end, and we are expecting to get our distribution, which is about $134,000 later in 2019. I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
So will that be the final distribution then of IMET?
Yes.
We
Great.
just sign off saying we've accepted. And that's
I'm sure there will be yes to vote as part of the member group, and then IMET as a group will sign off.
Okay.
I'm not getting up this time.
That was the treasurer's report?
Right now, don't I have to do checks?
Yes.
Any questions on,
I only have one question. When was Fergie here?
He wasn't. So that was an agreement that we had for the Champions Banquet. So if you remember, we had a live auction item.
Yeah.
And part of that that live auction item was 4 people were able to go to Wrigley Field field and sit in a suite with him.
Oh, I got it.
So it was an appearance fee for him to go to the movie theater
Got
and
it.
sit with the 4 people.
Okay, got
We
it.
split that 50/50 for the auction.
Okay. I just missed him. I just.
Yeah, you, no,
You'll
seriously,
get a call.
Okay, fine.
you can get them back.
He came a couple of years ago, didn't he, for the Champions Banquet? Yeah.
Mhm.
This was, for a fee, he'll come back.
Yeah, exactly.
Costs money.
Okay, thanks. Sorry.
So aside from that appearance fee, as I have reviewed the invoices, the checks, and they're all consistent with our expectations and our policies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's go back to unfinished business, Rosewood Beach.
Okay.
Margaret?
Hello again.
Hi.
I have some printouts, so
Great, thank you.
that way I don't have to go back and forth a million times.
Do you know how to change the tab up there?
I think so.
Okay.
I've used a computer once or twice.
All the cards are coming in. Yeah. They're using alternatives.
Okay.
Pass it down, please.
Sorry, we're just, whining about the traffic.
Oh, okay. Well, it's better than whining about the large waves you had yesterday.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Offshore, they were 5.6 feet. I don't know what they were nearshore, but I understand there was a bit of additional erosion occurring.
Thanks.
So, oh, sorry.
No, that was good.
Little
Thank you.
salt?
Yeah, that's nice.
Sorry. Well, let's talk about sand nourishment. We'll leave the other alternatives for future improvements to Rosewood Beach for another meeting. This one's just focusing on the sand nourishment itself. So these first few slides at the beginning are just rehashes of the last presentation. This was post-construction of Rosewood Beach in 2015. You can see visually where that shoreline is. And this is the more recent Google Earth image of 2018, which shows a visual recession of between 45 and 70 feet across the coves. So this is a cross-section of the surveys that we take every year as part of your monitoring program. The original dash line is the 2015 post-construction and where we are now with the 2019. You can see extreme flattening of the beach and also a more sharp, and I do have a pointer, a sharp slope just at the water line, which is very lightly shown here as a dashed line above what the previous water line was, shown in blue. So horizontally speaking, you have only
That's
lost...
the higher lake level then, right?
It is a higher lake level
Okay,
now,
okay.
yes. So with the higher lake level, you would have only lost horizontally about 35 feet of horizontal movement of the shoreline. But because of where it was back in 2015, it appears that you've lost 55 feet based on where the water level was then.
Can you explain
and
that
where-
again? I'm not following
Sure.
that. Yeah.
So the change in water level, of course, inundates the shoreline, and some of that sand is now underwater. But visually, you would only lose a small portion under the water. We're showing that there's additional erosion based on the fact that you would only lose maybe 10, 15 feet visually due to water level changes. But because of the erosion, it appears that 55 feet have actually eroded. I didn't explain that better, did I?
Yeah, I kind of, I should understand. So it appears that we've lost, we should have lost less, actually, the optics should be, should have lost less beach because of the higher lake levels, but as it turns out, it's more because in addition to the higher lake levels, there's been erosion.
That is true. Yes.
So that's what you're, am I
Yes.
understanding this?
The amount of erosion that would have occurred had the lake level been static is about 35 feet. But because the lake level also increased, there's that inundation of the shoreline. So when you walk out there, it appears that there's 55 feet
Got it.
of
So
loss.
do we know why there would have been a 35-foot erosion if the lake levels would have remained static? Why, is there an issue with the design that caused that erosion?
What we talked about last time that
I'm sorry,
I
it
was
was
here.
that last meeting.
No, that's okay. Is that the Army Corps of Engineers, and I didn't include that slide, put the slope at a 1 to 10, and at higher water levels, the shoreline naturally wants to flatten. So it has now flattened to a 1 on 20, 1 to 15 in certain spaces, which causes that extreme slope on the back end. And it's a natural thing that it wants to do. But because it was built at 1 to 10 and now wants to be between 1 to 15 to 1 to 20, all that additional material has been brought down the slope and deposited outside of your breakwaters.
So were the assumptions flawed in that the reason it wasn't built at 100? Did you ask the same question?
Yeah, this is my exact line of questioning.
I'm sorry. I should have watched the tape. I'll just watch the tape.
That's okay. It's not. I don't have their engineering reasoning behind why they chose the sand grain size that they did, or the analyses that they did. But one of my slides, and I think it's the next one, is this is a rule of thumb for average beach slope based on tidal locations, and this is used throughout the world. Lake levels are a little different because they will stay at an elevated position for a longer period of time. We don't have that normal fluctuation. So these don't hold true to lake levels, but no one has done the research to really figure out what that is. When they chose their grain size, which was a medium sand, the rule of thumb says it should sit at a 1 to 11.5. So choosing 1 to 10 is a little steeper, but not much. Then what I'm now recommending is that to help stabilize and to hold the shoreline where it is, it should be a bit coarser in the 1 to 2 millimeter range.
Can I perhaps add some color to it?
Yes.
I think the intention was to have the softer sand because of the use we were putting it to, which was play area, beach to relax, et cetera, et cetera. So the less coarse sand was the sand of choice for the use that we were putting the beaches to.
Did we choose the sand or the Army Corps?
Yeah, I'm sure it was a collaborative.
Okay.
This is the sand I can't say who recommended it. Certainly not me.
Yeah.
It was appropriate, though.
It was appropriate.
Usage.
It is appropriate for recreation sand, and we are at a historic time of very high water.
Yeah, I get that.
And so it's not typically something that you would design for long term to say, well, we need cobbles there because we might have this very high water. For most circumstances, the torpedo sand that you have, the finer grain sand, is appropriate and would not have the erosive recession that it has undergone.
Okay.
What's the natural sand that's already there?
Natural sand is pretty fine. It's between 0.4 and 0.6 millimeters. So when they chose this medium sand, that is natural. As you probably have noticed along the shoreline everywhere else, it's also eroding. It's also being pulled offshore due to the higher water levels. And it's just a dynamic substrate in such an environment with the waves and the wind, water levels as high as they are. So to give you an example of another beach that did use coarser sand, there is Lake Forest, just to the north, and I presented this last time as well. They used a coarser sand along the near shore of their beach, but also you can see mixed in is some finer grain sand. So there's a little bit of both. The nice thing about this sand is it doesn't stick to your body. It actually falls off really easy, but you can't make sand castles. So it just depends on what type of recreational activities you're looking to have in it. The people of Lake Forest have gotten very used to it and enjoy it. And the reason it works so well is this is a picture from 1998 where there was similar water levels, slightly lower than they are today. But you can see this picture change to last year, and there's virtually no change. It remained static throughout that time period, and you will see water level, the shoreline change, but that's just due to inundation and not actually movement of the sand itself. So calling around to a few quarries in your area, what you have now is the torpedo sand, which is shown on the left. That is a dime for scale. And what they have, which is one size bigger, now I didn't search exhaustively all the quarries in your area, but this is the less expensive option from the same quarry that's nearby, Thielen. This is a bird's eye sand. And now you can see some larger bits in there that we would actually ask them to screen out so that it would be a little bit lower than what it is now, but this has an average of about 4 millimeter. So it's a little coarser than we would look for, but easy to screen out and not too expensive. So this is from our monitoring study, and apologize for the graphics, but I'm an engineer, so this is pretty much what I can do. This is the 2015 survey, and where we are today, even though this is rather small, is in this second golden color. So if you look at where that golden color is on the survey, you kind of get an idea of where the water level would be today if it was just to be inundated. And here is the survey as of 2019 that we just took in May. Now this red line, I was able to put a red line on here, shows where the water level is today. And you can see that's awfully close to, I guess I should have chosen another color except for magenta, but that is the edge of your structures, whether that be boardwalk or buildings. One thing to note is that the quick change in colors, of course, represents a very steep slope. So even though the water level is slightly away from that, every time there's a wave or any type of water level change, it's pulling things down that slope. Now, my recommendation whenever there's infrastructure involved is to have a 20-foot buffer of sand in front of your structures. It's just a good padding, basically, to make sure that your structures aren't undermined. That is shown in the green line. That is a 20-foot offset of all of your infrastructure. The one thing that I do want to mention is that the swimming cove, not the swimming cove, cove number 3. Does that have a name? Is it the recreation cove?
The South.
Cove. So the South Cove actually has a 20-foot buffer, and even though it has lost the most amount of sand in this erosive high water scenario, all your infrastructure is safe. So putting additional sand there would only be for recreational purposes. It's not for purposes of holding any infrastructure, because it's all fine in its current condition. The swimming cove in the middle does trigger that 20-foot buffer. You are within that 20 feet, and obviously you are aware that the interpretive cove is already having infrastructure that is undermined. So both of those coves are good locations to put some emergency sands to hold the beach, and can be argued for regulatory purposes as well to get emergency approval to move forward. So if we wanted a full replacement between the 2019 and the 2015 survey of just replace what was there originally, these are the costs. I put down both the torpedo sand and the bird's eye. You might have noticed from the previous slide that the costs were very similar. And even though the bird's eye costs less itself, the cartage cost equalized the cost between torpedo sand and bird's eye. So whichever way you choose to go, there's very little difference. There was 75 cents per cubic yard difference, and that was it.
Margaret, do these prices include the spreading of the sand or just the cost delivered?
They included a $5, I should have mentioned, a $5 per cubic yard blading cost associated with it as well. And that was generated in-house from our team based on our experience on other beaches in the area. It's approximately $5. It could go up or down maybe $1 or $2.
So is it baked into this?
It is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's already baked in.
So, and I just want to kind of go, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting, but
Not at all.
I always
That's
do.
your job.
So how do they get the sand to the swimming cove and to the South Cove?
Right. The most likely, and it will be based on the contractor, and they will come up with other options, but we would suggest putting in a temporary culvert to allow the ravine to continue to release any of its waters, and creating a land bridge over it. So they could easily then drive from the parking lot over and onto the beach itself, and then along the beach.
So we're not looking at them bringing in by barge?
No, I would prefer that they don't, because then you have double loading, and a barge getting in here is going to be difficult.
I got it.
And when you're blading the material, you're going to want to use land-based equipment and just push it out and always stay above the water line. Once you're in the water, regulatory might get a little iffy because then you have release of chemicals from the machinery and such, and we want to avoid that.
What if we did nothing? What would your best guess would be what would happen over the next 5 years?
Over the well, 5 years, I would guess that the water levels are going to start to go back down. Historically speaking and statistically speaking, we have about a period of 5 years of high water before it starts to recede again, and it happens every 21 years. We are in year 3 of the high water scenario. So we have another 2 years that this is going to go on. But then again, if I had a crystal ball, I'd be Madame Bojek, and I'd win the lottery. So
I don't know who Madame Bojek is, but
I'd have a turban. It would be a great look. But
so if we did nothing,
if you did nothing, what you have now is stable, from what I can tell from the as-built drawings, which don't actually give a depth, you have piling under all of the boardwalks, which is supporting it. While it gives the top of the pile elevation, I don't know how far down it goes, so I don't know if it'll start to undermine. And if it starts to undermine, it's going to cause undue stresses on the boardwalk, which could cause some breakage and failure. Your structures, your buildings, are surrounded by sheet pile with a tie-back anchoring system, so they're fine. They won't have any issues, even if the sand were to drop a few feet in front of them. According to the Baird report, they can lose up to about 4 feet in front of them, and they'll still be fine.
That's just the interpretive center.
That is the interpretive center, correct?
That's the one that's protected by the sheet pile.
yeah, the other ones are not.
The other ones are not.
Right.
And obviously,
These back here, these washrooms.
But then again, we don't know with global warming or whatever what's going on with the climate.
Right.
We don't know if that 21-year cycle is actually going to repeat itself.
That's true. And it's just a statistical probability. It's never an absolute. But that's what we do for best guesses. This year was exceedingly high, despite the fact that we had a warm winter, because precipitation was much greater than evaporation from the lakes. And that's what the balance is. It's precipitation against evaporation. If we were to have another very warm winter, it's possible evaporation will be on the higher side than precipitation. But we've had very wet 2 years, and that's added to our water levels considerably. And they followed 2 very cold years, which limited evaporation. So that's why we've gone from historic lows in 2013 to now historic highs in every lake but Lake Michigan in 2019. And we were only 0.2 of an inch below historic highs. I think I have that right.
but
So-
if we do nothing, we're exposing the facilities to the storm surges over the course of the winter.
Yes.
Which are worse in November.
Well, that's the
Fall and winter
Emmett,
storms are worse.
Emmett Fitzgerald type storm. It was like
Right.
that was in November.
Well, yeah,
When the winds of November come early.
yeah, exactly.
or the storm we had over the weekend.
Yeah.
Right.
Down there, it was pretty vicious.
Right.
Can we go back to the sand? I think you were about to talk about that. So the bird's eye sand has larger size.
It
But you
is.
said they strain it out,
Yes.
and so it would end up looking like the torpedo sand?
No,
Oh.
not at all. Everything is greater than the torpedo sand. What we would want to do is take out the largest stones that were maybe 4 millimeters and leave you with about 1 to 2 millimeters. It would look a lot more like the Lake Forest sand.
So if we chose the bird's eye sand,
Yes,
it's going to be mixing with the torpedo sand.
it will.
So what would that be like?
Well, you can either mix it on site and already have a mix. Otherwise, what we can do, and is in a future slide, is band it, which means that you're putting in torpedo sand and then you're creating a frontage of this bird's eye sand. That will naturally mix at the top and as people walk in and out. You'll also see new material that's coming from offshore as part of the littoral system start to end up in that bird's eye as well. But the bird's eye is creating this barrier which is allowed to stay at a steeper slope and it is therefore protecting the beach better.
So where would the bird's eye sand be? Would it be closer to where the slope is now, or be closer to the lake?
Those are one and the same.
Yeah, they are?
Yes.
Okay.
So it would be where the water is impacting the slope of the
Got
beach.
it. So closer to the boardwalk would be the torpedo sand.
We can, yes. And so that is an option. Now, you can do the entire thing because costs are about the same. You can do the entire thing in bird's eye. But if you prefer to keep the soft recreational feel of torpedo sand, then you can build out torpedo sand and just band the front of your shoreline with the bird's eye.
And have you done that before? Is there examples
Yes.
of that?
Well, that's essentially what, in some ways, Lake Forest is, because the back of the beach is a good mix, and it's very soft. And it's when you get to the front along the shoreline that you feel that the smaller stuff has been pulled out, and it's now a larger grain size. My company also recently implemented that up in Sister Bay, up in Dork County, and the same thing. You're going to end up with that larger stone right at the water's edge because it's less dynamic than the soft stuff, which gets pulled off and pulled into the littoral system. But
So it's almost like it's anchored,
yes,
so that the...
it's a heavier stone.
Yeah, so it anchors along the water edge.
Right.
Which reduces the amount of the erosion.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
And that would be perhaps an option for the swimming cove versus the other two, which have different uses.
Yeah.
Yep. And the use of those coves comes into play as to what type of material you want. Now, you can replace the entire thing back with torpedo sand, and as lake levels are high and as strong waves come, it's going to continue to erode. It's just going to
Can I just throw out there,
disappear again.
what was the sand, what were the two choices we talked about? What was called the one that was a little bit thicker than the fine sand that we have down there now?
The fine sand is your torpedo sand. One higher than that is bird's eye.
Oh, I thought, okay, that's why I'm confused. I thought there was I never had heard the term bird's eye
Bird's eye.
before. So that's what you're calling that one, that's two things
Yes.
thicker. Got
Yes.
it. I thought there was that thing and bird's eye, and we were comparing the two of those, but
Oh.
there's just one.
There's just one
alternative
Yeah.
of- okay.
They also gave me one for pea gravel, but that was even larger than bird's eye. And when I got the sample of bird's eye, I said that's large enough. We
Yeah.
don't need to go any larger than that.
And is there a way to do the torpedo sand still in any kind of play area?
Yes.
Yeah, so that the anchoring of the bird's eye
Mm-hmm.
would help sustain and keep, not all, but a majority of that in around a play area.
Yes, yes. So such as with the South Cove, that is primarily recreational, and your volleyball courts and whatnot, you can still build out with your torpedo sand and then put a bird's eye along the shoreline to hold it. Now, it would have to be a thick band of bird's eye on the order of 5 to 10 feet, but that would be closest to the shoreline, and you would still have the torpedo sand then
Got
for
it. Now I understand.
So these are the costs for that full replacement, but these numbers, which are in cubic yards, also include areas of the upland areas that have also sunk.
What does full replacement mean?
Full replacement means to get you back to where you were after
2015.
Correct.
Got it.
Yeah, but that does include the upland area. So for trying to target where we need sand the most, the additional options actually reduce that coverage area. So this was the first option that we started looking at, which this is for construction. I feel like this might be a different slide. This is in the updated presentation, is it?
Yeah, I hope
Okay.
so.
That's okay. I can talk through it. I know I had titles and such on it, but that's okay. This is, so during construction, when they're pushing it out from the land, the slope is steeper. It's the angle of repose. It is not the slope that eventually will settle down due to wave impact, actually flattening it out. So to push it out, that would be about 40 feet of torpedo sand, and then banded by that 5 feet in front of it. What that eventually then becomes is it starts to flatten out. And you can see in the graphic that much of that bird's eye sand has actually moved out to protect that front face down toward the bottom of the slope. and the torpedo sand behind it has actually flattened out as well. So then you have a 20-foot buffer up at the top. This is a lot of sand, but it's only targeted at the shoreline and doesn't include anything behind it. This is the interpretive cove. So what that would look like in plan view, and again, as an engineer, my graphics aren't so great. I lost my graphic person yesterday. The coverage area kind of is shown here for, this is the large build out of this area. We don't want to put anything in front of the ravine outflow because it's just going to push it away. So I haven't included that area. And those are the cubic yardage and cost estimates is if we were to do that 40-foot of torpedo sand with only the 5-foot of bird's eye, or do the entire thing in bird's eye. You can see the cost isn't very different between those two.
So effectively, if we did the hybrid, which is partly torpedo, partly bird's eye, we going to get the same result if we do it all bird's eye, or how? What's
No, it'll stay steeper. It will stay steeper. So you'll have more of that 40-foot berm at the top, and it will come down at a 1 to 10, 1 to 8. It will be more steep on the front slope.
With the hybrid?
With just the bird's eye.
Got it.
Yeah, with a hybrid, you have more of this shape, which is a double slope.
So go back to the last slide, not the one before. So the outflow.
Yes.
I mean, is there in danger of more erosion coming from that outflow? Because when we have big rains, obviously there's a stream, there's a pretty rushing stream.
Yep.
So how do we protect the area where you're putting the new sand?
Well, it's a dynamic system, so I would expect for it to move around a little bit. You can continue with the bird's eye along the side here, but you will start to see that to erode as well. The only way to really hold it is to continue that stone revetment shelf that you have here up against it so that it holds that edge.
How far out does the revetment go now?
Right now,
on this picture,
not very far. I think you can see where my pointer is. It just stops
No,
about
can't
at
see-
that point.
can't see the pointer. Oh,
She's wiggling it.
got it.
Yeah.
So we just took it to the edge of the boardwalk, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
So what does it entail to extend that stone revetment? What would we have to do?
You just have to build it out. It would require some dredging of material so that you can get a firm base in there so that it isn't undermined, and then continue the stone outward. That permitting wouldn't be approved within an emergency permit, but could be part of the future long-term solution.
I mean, is that a six-figure project, or what kind of project?
No, this isn't too long. We typically would think of stone as being maybe $1,000 per linear foot. So if we're talking about 50 feet here, we're talking about $50,000.
Would you recommend that that's done?
It's a dynamic system. I don't know that it needs to be done. I think if this starts to carve around this edge a little bit, that doesn't really bother me. We just don't want all of this sand leaving, which right now, because of its soft nature, it has that capacity to exit the cove.
And that's an infill we could do. We could
Yes.
come back after we implement this, and if after a year we're seeing really significant erosion, we can then put the stone in, and there's obviously some sand that would have to be brought back. But it isn't necessarily something that we need to do at this emergency point.
I'm
Yeah.
just,
Yeah, I had the same question, and you beat me to it. So.
I'm sorry.
All right, so if we wanted to be more targeted and only protect the infrastructure, then we can remove what's in the corner here. This doesn't bother me so much. Again, as a dynamic system, this sand is going to want to migrate over time to the sides. So that is going to result in less than a 20-foot beam at the top. After storm events, you'll have more of a 10-foot beam, but a lot of this material will remain in front of that infrastructure to protect it. So this is a reduced cost alternative.
Can you go back and forth?
It's really just that one side.
Yeah.
But the effect of doing this picture is that at some point we're going to continue to see a drop-off.
Yes. Well, no, it's still fronted by the bird's eye, and the bird's eye will continue to protect
It
it.
won't wrap around?
It doesn't need to wrap around. That's
No, I
going
meant
up onto the shore.
the erosion won't wrap around.
Oh.
to the north?
No, a good amount of this material, because it will be overwashing that bird's eye, is going to want to push to the side into a more calm area. So you're not going to see it suddenly erode around the backside.
Okay.
The shape, because you're now working with torpedo sand and bird's eye, the shape of the cove won't be as beautiful crescent as it is right now. It will take on more of a humped shape in the middle and then continue out. But you're only going to see that from the air. So when you're on it, so kind of got that in your mind?
Got it in my mind. But let me just stay with this question.
Yes.
We had an earlier slide, a nice, even, steady slope out to the water.
Yes.
We're getting back to a nice, even, steady slope out to the water.
Yes.
That's what we're doing.
We are.
That's the key, I think, on this.
Yes, it can be steeper at the bird's eye material because that can hold a steeper slope, like a 1-on-8. What you had originally was a 1-on-10, and now what you'll have with the bird's eye in front of it is that 1-on-8, but behind it will be more of a 1-on-15 because that's really what the torpedo stand wants to sit at.
And I think what we need to get to is continuation of not this, but the gradual slope going out. And that's the key, I think, on at least two of these.
Yes. The build out from the top is one of the requirements because right now it's way too steep for any type of access, whether you're able-bodied or not. So that will be part of the work that the contractor will have to do is continue to blade the sand in areas where it is too steep to gentle. To gentlify.
Yeah, I like that word.
Yeah, to make that a bit more comfortable for an entrance.
So this would be option, we'll call it A, and the one before it would be option B.
Okay. Yes, and then they have subcategories, and there is a summary at the end, but I think it's in the other presentation, which I do have on a thumb drive. It's in my printout, but I don't know that it's in the presentation on that computer.
I'm not sure which one you have up there now, so that's the one I
I
thought.
think this is the one I sent you yesterday.
No, it should be. I think it's the one from today.
Okay.
But if you have another one, we can.
Possibly, yeah. When we hit the point
Okay.
where it's a divergence, we'll come back. So the swimming beach does have that scarp. It's not nearly as bad as the interpretive center, but you can see that it is steepening at that point. So I looked at the same cross-section that we just looked at with the 40-foot build-out, and these are the costs associated with that. This is the full build-out of the full cove itself and those quantities and costs. And this is a more targeted approach of just that back beach area. Do you have any questions?
I would say that the first option
The full build?
is more in keeping with the use that we see, that people use the whole expanse.
Yes, they do. They do. And this could be just part of your emergency response to place material here to save costs now. You do have your nourishment permit still being considered, but it will be coming. That will allow you to nourish annually up to a certain amount if you want more nourishment later on. So it kind of comes down to what we can afford at this juncture as well.
Is there economies of scale? I mean, is it cheaper to do it all at once versus doing a piecemeal, like doing the emergency repair and then subsequently do the nourishment?
Right. The cost of the material doesn't change. I mean, they fluctuate based on their supply. So they did say that some of their sands would be cheaper next year after they blast out more material. But the contractors' costs generally will go up because they have to remobilize and get all their machinery down. So that's the grand savings is your contractor blading everything and bringing his things to site.
All right, can you go back to the picture before?
Yep.
But this one restores the entire swimming pool.
So people do swim right up to the rocks?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And they access, they use the beach all the way up to the rocks too. They set up, chairs and blankets and things like that.
Well, if I had to make a decision on this one, I would go with
I'm asking
this
questions.
option.
Yes.
Okay. Let me see, let's see if the next one's, okay, this is where it's the other presentation. Can we switch it?
Yes, actually, I think.
I'm happy to even run it off of this.
We have the,
No, actually, I think
7, it's over a million.
Oh, okay.
May, I just downloaded the. Unless. Does that say B drive right there?
This is N, all the way at the top. Board agendas.
I don't want to do. Is this it right here?
That one, yep. That's the correct. What do you think? Sorry, should we send you two?
But
To do it right. And this is the problem, we can't do it wrong.
Probably still. Can we go back to that?
Because I was afraid of adding all those. So you got it from there? I think
Thanks.
it's like they titled it under to television last year.
Oh.
But we know the price, so we still turn the TV a little bit.
It's gonna now.
Do you not have this
Are we
on
gonna
your
save
computer?
$20,000?
Here, I'll zoom ahead to the correct one.
I think she has it now.
Is it on your computer?
we have this. Yeah.
Here we go.
yeah.
Yeah, we
Oh,
got
it's
it.
working, okay.
Oh, okay, so you have it on your computer?
Yes.
Great. So now we even have animations. So this is one that we added last night, so that's why it wasn't in the presentation I gave to Brian. Sorry about that. So this is even reduced a little bit more, but with the other engineers in the office, we decided this was appropriate. We didn't want to go anything below this. This is like a bare minimum approach to hold the shoreline, and that includes putting out 20 feet. Now, granted, this whole 30 feet could be torpedo sand, but we're remaining cognizant that it could be bird's eye. We know that the torpedo sand is more comfortable and more accustomed to already by your users.
Which cove are we talking about at this one?
This one,
It's the South Cove?
well, no, this cross-section is showing the interpretive cove, but can be applied anywhere. So it's just a
Okay.
representative cross-section. One thing you might notice in here is that the top of this vertical is actually lower, where the edge of your scarp right now is at about 590. This is at 587. So it's a little bit lower, which just means that this area where those people are standing would have to be bladed back to flatten that out to make a nice transition to the two. But by reducing it those 3 feet, you save a lot of
When you say
sand.
blading, what do they use to do that?
Bulldozer.
Bulldozers?
They can do that with a bulldozer. They can do it with a rake. Once pushing the material out will definitely be a bulldozer, and then a rake will likely get the slopes for you. Okay, so that includes, and you would have seen the differences on the presentation. That includes increasing the width of today's water level of shoreline 30 feet. So from where you are today, pushing it out 30 feet. So visually, that's what you'll see.
So what happens if the lake levels go down?
That's even better, because then your
Where's it-
sediment doesn't want to move out. It will
You're talking about aesthetically?
No, I'm talking about, will the torpedo sand stay in, not, which is the thicker sand, the torpedo? No, the
No,
other one.
bird's eye.
Bird's eye.
Will the bird's eye stay in place?
Yes.
And so then, it could look like if the lake levels go down, then we'll have torpedo sand, then we'll have the band of bird's eye.
Yep.
And then if the lake levels go down, then there'd be another band of torpedo sand.
There would be the exposed and new torpedo sand that's banding the bottom of it. And that's where you start to get that mix again.
So will it then, over time, would it mix?
Yes, because what is happening is as the water level goes down and there's not sufficient energy to move that torpedo sand out, it gets deposited within that bird's eye.
And then the bird's eye, does it move around that at that point? Because I thought it was kind of more anchored in place.
No, the only thing that'll move is the torpedo sand that's mixed in. So it's like, how do I want to describe this? If you had a whole bunch of rocks and sand and everything and you pushed it underwater, all those little sand particles are going to drop out, but you'll still hold the rocks in your hand.
So,
There's not enough energy
so
to push that out.
it's not going to look, it won't, I'm talking about visually. Will it look, if the lake levels go down, will it look like there's a band of bird's eye and then torpedo surrounded by, on both sides by torpedo, or will they eventually mix together?
There will be some mixing, but you will see a heavier concentration of the bird's eye along the shoreline, along the...
Where the shoreline is currently.
Along
Because
the
if the lake levels go down, the shoreline goes out towards the,
Correct.
goes into the lake.
So what happens is there's the initial construction, which looks like this.
Yes.
And then there is after construction. So this is after a number of storms come and they flatten that shoreline, because that's just naturally going to happen. When we push things out, it's at angle of repose, which is a very steep front. And then we will expect, and you should expect, your shoreline will start to look like it's retreating back, but it's just flattening to a more comfortable position. So if you were to have immediate low water next year after construction, you would still have those steeper fronts that would be on the 1 to 8, 1 to 6 natural angle of repose. If it gets hit by a few storms, you're going to see this right away. It's going to flatten because it doesn't want to be that steep. It wants to be at an angle that is more stable for it. So this will occur, and then your water level will start to go down. And what you can see here is there were a tiny band, only a 10-foot band of that bird's eye on the front. And after time, you're going to see it spread throughout, but holding that front
I see.
face. And it's very, very minor.
So
once
nature,
you dig a little bit,
nature creates that slope.
yes, it does. Yeah, the waves want to knock it down,
Interesting.
make it more stable.
Wow.
So that results then in 10 feet. So even if the water level were to go down, you actually end up with 40 feet of new shoreline that's then banded. So it's a
Mark.
win-win.
Excuse me, Margaret?
Yeah.
In this representation, which is the new material,
Yes.
there is a drop-off between where the people are standing, which I'll take as the boardwalk
Yes.
by the interpreters, and the sand.
Yes.
In the prior work,
It was higher.
it was maybe a smaller drop-off so that the people who were sitting on the chaise lounge would be at the sand level,
Right.
which is what our initial envision was.
Right.
Now, there's a drop-off.
No, because while this representative cross-section is showing that top as being at the 587 and the boardwalk is around the 590, what you're actually going to have is you're going to blade in between those two so that if you stepped off the chaise, you'd be on sand, but on a slope as you were coming down.
But in the others, you'd step off the sand and it'd be
And you'd
more...
be on a flat
and a
area
flat-
for an extension.
Okay.
Yes.
Has the chaise been removed yet?
No.
They have?
No.
So is the intent not to remove them then? Because then this will then slope and then it'd be back to where we were in 2015 and have the
Not
same?
this drawing, not this one that Margaret has in front of us now. The earlier options
Right.
Yes.
would be the
Including more sand.
2015, the chaise, and you keep going, and you're on the
So
sand.
we would not have to go through that whole exercise of removing the chaise and storing them, that we're basically restoring what it was in 2015, so it'll look like it was back then.
The other work that we saw earlier from Margaret, we'll put it to the 2015 configuration that won all the awards.
So I know, so we were going to spend money to remove the chaise and then build a railing there. So I guess under this scenario, if we assume we go with the earlier version.
Yeah, we've already put that on
hold.
on hold, and we told them that we might be canceling that contract. They know that.
Got it,
So
okay.
that we've been waiting for this.
Okay, okay.
So the reduction of material that is then required, these are the minimum replacement costs associated with that. And these are representative of filling in that entire cove, the way I showed in that plan view of it going from breakwater to breakwater along the entire crescent. So those are those costs. This is my last slide, which shows all those options with the 40-foot larger build-out, the targeted build-out, and then the 10-foot larger build-out just means the entire cove. Targeted build-out means right in front of the infrastructure, just to hold the infrastructure. And you would have a little more movement. But that reduces the cost down to what we could minimally achieve. Now, because the Recreation Cove didn't have any emergency needs, because there is no infrastructure that's imminently in a disastrous zone, I don't think we can get an emergency permit to place sand there. So I did not include any costs for those build-outs. The only reason I did include the cost in the replace to 2015 is that's how much material you've actually lost, is $265,000. I don't think you need to replace $265,000 worth of material in that cove. But
So I understand this, the 40-foot larger build-out with regard to cove, the interpretive code and the swimming code, that's what we showed from Ban with the 10-foot of the
yep, this is the 10-foot
yes,
option.
yes,
And then previously,
that's that. With the
I'm almost
with the
there.
bird's eye and the torpedo, like,
That would be the 40-foot build-out.
got it. And then, so we would not be able to get permits for the recreation cove, so that can actually be done through the nutrients over the time, like we're going to have that permit, I guess?
Yes, the South Cove can be nourished under your upcoming nourishment permit.
So hopefully, if everything works out, then these two coves, the interpretive code and the swimming code, will not need any more work.
Not for right now.
Okay, for foreseeable future, so that other permit, that when that kicks in, then we could focus on the third cove,
Correct.
which is the, got it.
Because it is unlikely, because there's no infrastructure in danger, at risk, that you will get emergency permission to place sand in the South Cove.
Got it. So we're talking about a $216,000 fix.
No, we're
No,
talking about a
511.
No, we're talking
We're talking-
$216,000.
Oh, you mean if we don't
we're not-
do the 3 one yet?
Because we can't get a permit to do
Yeah, but we
that.
have to think
Oh, no,
about
you
that.
have,
can't get an emergency permit.
but this is what the word,
You know what, you might have to
Explain it again?
explain that he wasn't here for the emergency permit first. So
Okay.
there's a specific reason we could get that.
Yes, so anytime we want to put nourishment, we would need a permit. And right now, we are being reviewed for an annual permit for 10 years for nourishment to your heart's abandon up to 10,000 cubic yards a year. That is being considered, but what we want is the immediate permission to put sand in. Now, that's considered an emergency permit application. And what they do is they look at it and they say, yep, we think this has merit. We understand that there's infrastructure at risk.
I understand.
Therefore, you have permission to put sand in while we review your permit. It still goes through the same.
I'm thinking from a
permitting
budgetary
process.
standpoint, I assume we'd have to amend the budget to spend the 200, I'm looking at $216,000 being spent on an emergency basis. Is that correct? And so
now
would
you're
we-
looking at 246,000.
246.
Where's the
If we go
240?
with replace the
Top two lines.
Question I have, Maria.
Oh, I see. I got it. Okay,
Yep.
246.
So
Okay.
you've given us different options, sand-wise and volume of sand.
Yes.
If we are civilians listening, as you are the expert on this, if money were not an issue,
Right.
what would you recommend we do?
Well, if money's not an issue, I'd recommend putting out as much sand as you can now, but band it with the bird's eye. The interpretive cove might even be better if the entire thing was bird's eye versus taking the risk of also putting in torpedo sand, which is more dynamic. Since you're using it as kayak launching, it's actually a good location to put bird's eye because it doesn't stick to you. Everything runs down it nice and no one's
So-
sitting there and swimming.
So is the cost of that replaced the 2016, 2015, I apologize.
Yeah.
$116,000.
Well, it's the $116,000, but that included putting sand in front of the outfall, which I don't recommend. So that would actually be the next line down. The 40-foot larger build-out is the $86,000. And that's an average of the torpedo sand and the bird's eye because they were so close in cost.
So you're recommending that in Cove One, the interpretive center, to put the bird's eye, and it's basically the same cost.
Yes.
So-
If I
yeah,
had my
yeah.
druthers, I would say do the whole thing in bird's eye. It's a different feel, but it's definitely more stable and will protect your
So
infrastructure.
that goes,
Do that.
yeah, I'm
Do
sorry.
we take out the torpedo sand that's there, or we just?
Oh, no.
It just mixes in.
You would just put it on top of it. There's no need
Okay.
to take out what you have.
So everything north of the outflow, you're recommending to bird's eye, and then
Yes.
south of that, with only regarding Cove Two, you're recommending doing the 10-foot collar
Yes.
of bird's eye, and then the remaining of torpedo, and that's the $130,000 option.
That is the $130,000 option for the larger build-out. Now, there was some concerns expressed by Jeff, and I understand them, that if we build out with 40, it might actually push the swimming activity further toward the breakwaters, because now you have a very large shoreline. So this might be an area where you want to stay with the 10-foot build-out, because then you do have a nice pool inside that cove for swimming, and people aren't forced outside of the breakwaters.
That's the 77.
That is the 77,000.
Is there a way to represent what that looks like for that swimming cove? Like, where would the beach line start if you went back to way back
Right.
to where we had the 3? So you're saying that because we're building that out, it's pushing everything out, so the beach line would start much further out.
Correct.
Is there a way for you to show that and see what what we're talking about?
Well, the representative cross-section shows that a bit. There you go. So where you are now, your water line is way back here, and you have all this water. Now, if you start building this out, your shoreline doesn't start here.
Right,
So
and
you,
so
now you
how-
have this much smaller pool.
Yeah, do you know how long that is?
Well, when I originally looked at this and had my graphic person say, let's push out 20 feet, which is the after construction setback,
Yeah.
and then come down on a 1 to 10, 1 to 12, which is where torpedo sand wants to be, it actually reached out of the breakwaters. So you would only have like 3 or 4 feet at the breakwater. So I said, okay, that's way too much. We have to pull it back. And that's why we want something a little more steep in that front that's going to allow you to still have that pool.
So the,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the trade-off is, do we want, obviously we need sand to protect the boardwalk and the infrastructure, but the more sand you put in, obviously that's more sand for people to enjoy beach activities on the sand, but it's less lake to enjoy swimming. The middle cove being the swimming cove, there could be, and we haven't discussed this with aquatic staff, but there would be more lake in that area inside the cove there to swim in.
If we
Right
did
now,
10
it's
feet.
huge, which is,
Yeah.
you can fit a lot of swimmers in there, but the downside is there's not a lot of beach. It's all water, because we do not allow swimming outside of the stone, because the lifeguards can't see over it, so swimming is only inside the cove. So, from a swimmer's perspective, there may be some benefit to having it a little larger in the middle cove.
But
Right.
for the majority of the use of that area, I don't think I know people are swimming, but it's a playground. I mean, it's used, I think, primarily by families who want to dig in the sand, who want to play in the sand, and go in the water and splash around. Sure, there are swimmers. I'm not denying that. But the primary use, how different would it be if we, are you saying we cannot get back to the 2015 Cove 2?
We can. That's going to be the 130,000.
Right.
But that's not
you
for
sa-
emergency, right? We couldn't get,
Yeah, it is.
Well, it is for emergency. We would have to argue that the infrastructure is at risk.
Which
and
it
it's
is.
far enough back that it is getting very close to that infrastructure, so I think we can still do that. And that would be, that 130,000 was based on the whole thing being done in a torpedo sand.
Can I ask a question, Barney?
Yeah, of
If we do the 40-foot larger build-out,
Mhm.
which we're then shrinking the
Swimming
swimming area,
Mhm.
what happens when the lake waters go down? Because then it becomes larger than 40 feet, and then the swimming area gets smaller.
Well, it
Is that
starts
right?
to look
This
like
was-
this
Yeah,
again.
that was what I was hoping you'd show, like that,
Yeah.
okay.
So this was the original.
We're 40 feet, we're talking 40 feet at high lake waters.
We are talking 40 feet gets pushed out in the original construction, and as it starts to flatten, there's actually still that 20-foot buffer, so that's what you still have. Here, we're showing, this is about 30, 35 feet out from, that's your buffer, and then before it hits water and goes down.
So I'm saying, if we do with high lake waters, we build it out
Yes,
to 40 feet.
yes.
What happens to that swimming cove when the lake levels go down?
It'll look like this,
It'll look like this.
which
Yeah,
is
it's-
what we had in 2015.
It's more of the slope becomes exposed, and it pushes the water further out toward the opening of the breakwaters.
But there's more than 3 or 4 feet, if I understand you, between the front of the beach and the breakwater.
Yes, this is more steep because it naturally wanted to erode away and flatten things out, so it became steeper. So you had more about 4 or 5 feet of water depth at the entrance to the breakwaters.
Oh, you were saying water depth.
Water
Not
depth.
talking about, okay, so now I think I'm understanding better.
Yeah.
A person enters the water line in our 40-foot build-out scheme.
Yes.
How many feet of water is there until the breakwater, is what I'm asking.
Right,
Not how
okay.
deep
You
is the
mean the
water.
distance?
Yeah, the distance to
Oh, the
that's what I was
distance
asking.
to the breakwaters.
Yes.
That is about an additional 40 feet of horizontal.
Okay.
Sorry.
Because I heard 34 feet, I'm thinking they're walking in and they're standing on the breakwater.
No.
And in
Sorry.
2015,
Now I get it.
let's make sure I understood this. In 2015,
Yes.
it was about 40 feet.
It was about 40 feet from the shoreline to the breakwaters. Yes.
So that goes back to my question. If the lake waters go down,
Yes.
is it still going to be 40 feet?
No.
Because you're saying right now, in 2015, it was 40 feet.
Right. If they go down to the lake levels of 2015, then you have 40 feet. If they go down to the lake levels of 2013, you have 10, 12, 15 feet.
That's problematic.
But keep in mind, again, it was designed for the 2015 conditions, and that's,
Yeah. That was more of an average water
That's an
level.
average.
Right. Because we have on Lake Michigan a 6-foot swing. So if we're sitting at a shoreline that is 1 to 15, 6 feet at 1 to 15, 90 feet.
Wow. Is there somewhere in the middle?
That's, and that's the game we play. So they did everything based on average water levels.
Yeah.
And around 2015, we were at average water levels.
Yeah.
do any of the 10 feet, 20 feet, 40 feet accommodate preserving a 40-foot distance from edge of sand to the breakwater?
Nothing has been designed to that level at this point because we're still in the conceptual phases. If that is the requirement to say we want at least 40 feet at an average water level, we can design to that.
But that would be the 2015 at the average water level.
Yes.
And I think what Cal is asking, if we go below the average water level
Yes.
and it starts receding,
Correct.
then the swimming cove gets smaller.
Yes.
The swimming area gets smaller. And it's a
That's-
question of what is it used for? Is it used for distance swimming back and forth?
I'm not concerned
or
about the
splashing?
distance swimming, I'm worried about more of splashing.
That's 10 feet. That,
But this is what we built in 2015.
yeah.
So we're just
I think
putting
that
it
should be our
back-
goal.
We're just putting it back to what we built initially.
We are. And if you put the bird's eye along the front face, you're making it more stable in this higher water level environment.
Margaret, does the water depth, by doing any of this, does that have an impact to the water depth in the cove? So right now, some of our deepest areas are like 6 to 7 feet. Does it change anything with that by doing this?
It will, because as that slope starts to flatten, that material is actually stretching further out toward those breakwaters, and in which case your deepest areas are infilling with new sediment, and therefore it's a little shallower. But there's no diving or anything.
I remember when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And you could walk out 100 yards before it got up to my chest. And
Yes.
I was a little kid then.
And it's
I
not,
just thought I'd give you an...
at this higher water
That was the
level,
17th century.
Ah, yes.
You have to watch out for the T-Rex that was floating around.
Yeah, we fought them off, the megalodons.
when it was constructed, this color band is the 577 to 579. 577 is chart datum. That's close to a low water scenario. So you see that in this first blue band here. So we could even just count off of that. If we were at low water levels again, we have 1, 2, 3 feet of water at the middle of the breakwaters. And that's it. That's what you had back in 2015. In 2015, your water level was higher by 2 feet than the low water, which is why you had 5 feet at the entrance. Now, you have a lot more.
Yeah, I know, the status quo is not acceptable.
Right.
So what are you recommending?
If you were to say we have limitless money, what would you do?
I wouldn't say that, but I
I
would say,
know.
okay.
Well, we go to the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario. For the interpretive cove, because of the desire of the lake to cut that back to your infrastructure, I do recommend the bird's eye replacement. If you want to put some torpedo sand out and then even mix the bird's eye with the torpedo and put that as a band along the front, it will only pull out what it needs. It will separate on that top layer, which might be 6 inches.
And would you
maybe
do
a
10 or
foot.
40 feet there? 10
Um,
feet?
No, I would do more of the 40-foot.
Or-
I don't want to have a drop-off.
Okay, I'm just asking what you,
Yeah.
okay.
And
so-
that's,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
I was
And
getting
it-
recommendations.
If you want to be more targeted, then that is an option for just
Okay.
putting it in front of the
That's not your
infrastructure.
recommendation.
No, if money wasn't an
Yeah.
option, I'd say do the whole thing.
Okay.
You'll be happier that you did.
And then what's your
we
recommendation for the
did.
swimming beach?
That, I would actually take more of a targeted approach. That is where, I'm almost there. That's where I would go with this approach. Because what we have now is extreme high water scenarios. So just as we were saying, as the water level goes down and that shoreline edge where water hits a beach starts to recede, you're exposing more areas where people can put down their beach towels and recreate. What we're trying to do here is just build out this center section to protect the infrastructure and create more areas where they can sit down.
Well,
So-
but I'm not sure that, and I'm not sure I heard you right. The interpretive center is, guys, is it used by a lot of people just putting out blankets? Or is this the area where they put out the blankets?
Well, yeah, this is going to be the multi-use, but I mean, I would say primarily people right now, because in the middle part of the swimming cove, there is no room to put anything, so everybody
Well,
congregates to the outside
in
now.
2015.
Yep.
In 2015, the interpretive cove was not really used for recreation. Blankets, sit
No.
out there and sit.
No.
So this is the primary place where people are going to gather, bring their kids, and swim or dig in the sand.
Yep.
Yes.
And I don't think we should do anything that would diminish that ability and narrowing it does diminish that ability.
Yeah, Barney, I just want to hear a recommendation.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, so your recommendation, as I understand, is it's 40 feet at the interpretive center.
Yes.
And then why 40 feet versus 10 feet?
Because the massive erosion that you're having now suggests that it is not far enough from the breakwater to be stable on its own.
So the purpose of putting the 40 feet there is not so you can have more areas for people to put blankets out and recreate, it's to protect
Yes.
the infrastructure?
Correct.
Okay. Now, the swimming beach.
Swimming
Why are
beach.
you recommending this alternative versus the full 40-foot band that Barney was talking about?
Okay, so in this area, you have a number of dune grasses. You also have dune grasses over here. So putting more sand in front of those locations promotes people to put down their blankets in those areas. We already want them to stay out of those areas because they're considered habitat, and they would start trampling those. As the water level goes down, those areas are going to become naturally more exposed anyway. So putting more sand in that area doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. What we want to protect right now is the boardwalk because it's starting to pull back to that point, and no one can sit there. So what we're now doing is adding in 40 feet, which will flatten and it will pull back a bit, but we're adding 40 feet of what is torpedo sand, that soft, nice recreational sand, but then we're banding the front of it, and this band could even continue
Yeah, so
onto
let me ask you
the
that.
existing.
Why don't you ban the...
We can. Yep.
Okay.
That'll be a bit of an additional cost, but we can add that on. I would say double this number to get it all the way to either side
Okay.
The bird's eye number.
of the bird's eye, yes. And the bird's eye will hold that slope to be more stable.
That's a good one.
Okay.
In this, is there a drop-off from the boardwalk, or is it leveled out?
It's a very small drop off. This picture was taken, on July 17th. I have not seen it since.
No, I meant when we do this.
Oh,
Are we
no.
leveling it
Everything-
with the boardwalk?
Yes. Yes,
and is it
everything is
to-
going to be bladed, so it's level with the floor
It'll
boardwalk.
level and more akin to the slope of 2015 still.
Yes. And 2015, the Army Corps of Engineers for this cove said it was a 1 to 12. We would make it even flatter and then come down on the 1 to 12. We'd make it almost a horizontal, straight step off of that boardwalk and then come down on the slope
Do you have any-
instead of coming directly onto
Do you have
the
any
slope.
pictures of those protective areas on the side? Do you have any pictures of that? Is that what that is up there?
This is that protective area over
Right
on the
there?
side. Yeah, and you can see those dune grasses in that area,
We'll
which
go
I
down there and take a
believe
look.
that you might even have some fencing around to
We used to.
prevent people.
Yeah.
Okay, you used to.
I'm going to go down there and look at that again.
Yeah.
Well, I think, putting on that, we don't want to intrude into that area.
Right.
And I guess what I'm just saying, I don't know the real diameter of the yellow that you were showing.
Yes.
How it wraps around, and that's more like a field survey.
Right.
Does that mean there's a drop to the right and the left of where you don't have this yellow?
Nope, that would be bladed. So
Okay.
it will represent a bit of a slope because what's going to happen is instead of the crescent shape, you're going to end up with a more oblong shape of it coming almost straight across and then continuing on to the side again. What we're just doing is band-aiding this middle area to hold that and build it out. But it will not be like a physical drop-off, no. And that will all come into the design and grading of the site that we would do as part of the next stage to get you design drawings to then go into construction.
For the South Cove,
South,
Cove,
yes.
that is on our fill permit that we're in the process of.
Correct.
But we will be able to restore the play areas, I meant the volleyball areas and those types of recreation areas that have been chopped away.
That is correct, yes.
With the fill permit.
With the fill permit.
Okay.
All right. So what, any other questions?
What's the timetable?
Yeah, what is our next steps and what are you looking for?
When do we
Yep.
have to make decisions?
That
Here
is
it
my
is.
last slide.
She's going to say right now.
Yep. So the decision to move forward, today is probably very quick to do that, but I do want to mull on it. But let's say that we do make that decision today. Well, then design and the emergency permitting could be done through the month of September. It's going to take us about 2 to 4 weeks to put those design drawings together for you. And also we'll want to talk about grading and sizes of beaches and where sand is going to be placed, and ultimately figure out the cost of this as well. So that's going to be the month of September. We would also then want to hire the contractor, and I established the quarry. We can do that both in September. We can hire a contractor without having those design documents fully done yet. It's blading sand. They're pretty much accustomed to doing that. Contractor availability might be a question mark, though, because it is late in the season. Other contractors, they usually preload their seasons, so it might be hard to find one. I don't know if you work with someone who has a bulldozer and who has placed sand before. We can always reach out to them. There you go. You can do it yourself. And then, so if we were able to do that, the first chance we have to deliver sand would be early October. I know that you have some special events happening there, so that would be October, say, 7th into the first week. Now, by our estimations, if I'm using 4,000 cubic yards of material, which is for both coves, a truck can hold about 9.9 cubic yards per load. That means we need 404 trucks. Now, a truck could be delivered from the quarry every 30 minutes, and that would be on scale with what a contractor can then blade and move into the other locations. Assuming that they're working 10.5-hour days, that's going to take about 20 working days.
How much noise is going to be created by all that work?
It's a truck, and the truck will be running through town. Yeah. And we would require that they cover any material that's being brought through, because we don't want any aeration of dust. So after the 20 working days, and assuming there will be 10 days of weather delay, of storm events, of anything that's going to cause a delay, that means that sand will be placed then by the end of November. And that again says we make that decision today to move forward into that. So that process will take about 3 months, and it assumes also that we get a quick emergency response on our permitting negotiations and discussions.
What's the exposure with, with additional bad storms? What is that? How would that impact us?
It will impact us. If the torpedo sand is placed first, which it will need to be, that torpedo sand we know is dynamic in such events. And if we were to receive a storm, it's going to start to flatten it, which means we would either bring in more material to build out what we had just lost and then front it with the bird's eye. That's pretty much our only option, actually.
You can't start with the bird's eye closer to shore.
No, because I'm not sure how we'd hopscotch to push that further out. The other options are to mound it and create like a barrier, and they would do that by pulling that dump truck pretty much all the way down to the water, creating this barrier of bird's eye, and then building behind it with the torpedo sand. And that's discussions with the contractor, because they're
How do they protect the boardwalk? Are they going to dump? They'll have to pull onto the boardwalk to then dump
They will.
it.
They might have to remove a portion of the boardwalk, which will be part of their requirement to put that back in as existing.
Okay.
It's possible.
Got it.
Yeah.
Brian?
Okay, so that would take about 3 months. Now, sand placement after January 1st is going to be more difficult, because that's when we typically start to ice in. We do have rubbling on this beach, which means that the winds are coming from the east. It pushes that ice up onto the beach and onto the shore and protects it, which is great for erosion protection, but it also means that they will have to dig that out to push in the sand. It just becomes a bit more difficult at that time. More protected, but it requires more blading and reworking when the spring thaw comes.
Oh, very interesting.
And there might be an additional cost with that then, for the reworking. You're more likely to get a contractor though in the winter.
Yeah.
You get nothing else to do.
So can we, unless there's other questions?
I guess people in the public want to
I was
talk to.
I was going to ask for a review of the recommendations so we could just have them outlined.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. And this would again be my recommendation because there are limitless permutations of how much sand we could put out there and how much banding we can
Understand.
put out there. But for immediate protection of the interpretive cove, I would recommend what's on there listed as the 40-foot larger build-out. That would be the entire area except for the area in front of the ravine outfall of bird's eye sand.
Okay.
You can put some torpedo in there. You can even mix in some torpedo so it makes a bit more of a transition versus a solid band, which aesthetically we would want to do. We would put some torpedo on the top, but what's below it should be primarily bird's eye to hold that slope. And that's the $86,000. With the swimming cove, I do not believe that you need additional sands on the side behind the breakwater, not at this point. If you decide you need it later,
Additional sand to be putting it back to 2015.
correct. All the way to the breakwaters.
What I'm hearing, I think that naturally that may occur without us putting the sand there.
The water was
It will
Definitely.
naturally want to start to spread out because it wants to reestablish that crescent shape. So you will see some thinning along the sides and more blending on that sides. In which case then we would add in the 40-foot of torpedo sand, which is good for people putting down their blankets and creating. To hold that due to the higher water levels and such, it is a recommendation to put the bird's eye along that shoreline as well. And that will help
Is that the
stabilize the shoreline.
40-foot targeted build-out?
That would be either the 40-foot targeted build-out. We can do as little as the 10-foot. If you have the option from money and mobilization and emergency permitting, then you might as well go with the 40-foot build-out.
And does that include the bird's eye all the way going from breakwater to breakwater?
That is about, that's shy about $20,000 for the additional bird's eye all the
And
way
would you
around.
recommend that?
It would make it more stable, yes.
So that's a yes.
That's a yes.
Okay.
So it's 84,000 plus 20,000,
Yes.
That's your recommendation.
okay?
It doesn't have to be that much.
Don't worry
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
We're just-
If
we
you
just
come
wanna
to me
hear
and
that.
say, what can you do for 50,000, we can come up with something that'll work for 50,000 in the interim, but it might not be a long-term solution.
Got it.
I know on the back end of this, we've also talked about structural changes to the breakwaters. Now, for the bird's eye and the interpretive cove, we might not need to do anything. That might be stable enough. We'd have to see how the water levels persisted and how that reshaped into its more stable profile to determine if a long-term solution was there. So I think we can even kick the can on making that decision if the bird's eye was put in. For the swimming cove, because we want to keep more of that torpedo sand, that's an area we'd still want to look at underwater weirs and closing the breakwater gaps as possible future solutions.
What's the timetable for that? When's,
Permitting on that is going to take about 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that would be on the backside to go ahead and put in those permits based on whatever decision you said for a concept, whether it then got implemented or if you said, lake levels are back down, let's just put this permit in our back pocket, it will be good for a number of years.
what's the cost of that project? About ballpark?
It was in the previous,
I wasn't here.
Yeah,
Do
sorry.
you remember? Anybody
Um,
remember?
it was a good amount.
For the weir?
300,000?
All right.
You have to go back.
And there were different options in there for
Okay,
different.
we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, none of that had been concluded.
I don't think you gave estimates for that, did you?
Not for the swimming beach. I gave them for the interpretive cove only.
Well, we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah.
We like you coming down from Madison, so you give me
love it.
Michigan tickets, by the way, for the Wisconsin Michigan.
Michigan
game?
tickets?
Yeah,
So-
If I don't, I'm going. Yeah.
So for the interpretive center,
Yes.
it's the 40-foot build-up, which is 86,000.
Yes.
For the swimming cove, it's 84 plus 20.
Yes.
And are there any other costs?
Those already include the cost of the contractor, our estimate on top of that.
And your
So,
design drawings and all that's all baked into those numbers?
Our design, no.
That's over, as an addition.
That is an addition, and Jeff did ask me for that, and I haven't gotten it to him yet.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
but it's a pretty straightforward project. So from a design side, I can do this in 2 to 3 weeks, so it's not an exorbitant fee. We'll put it that way.
So what we need to do tonight, I believe, is to give her direction and authorize the staff,
Yes.
right?
If you need a little time to
Well, let me
digest
ask you
it,
this.
yeah.
We've got, what's the total number?
190.
Plus design drawings.
Plus sign on.
Well, so call it 2 1/4, just to be safe.
Is there any objection to asking them to move forward?
I don't know, some people in the public may want to talk about this, because
Okay.
I'd like to hear that.
All right, does anybody in the public want to talk about this?
I have a question. Is there any
Your name
annual
is?
maintenance? I'm sorry?
Name and address, please.
Matt Pestine, 340 Marine.
Thank you.
Is there any normal annual maintenance on the beaches that you would already be spending at Rosewood? Any additional sand, you'd add something every spring? I don't know. I mean, that you wouldn't have to spend now.
Yeah, we have not, at this point, added any sand because
Right. So
Smith Group has been monitoring our sand.
Yes, so you need a permit to place sand, and currently there's no permit in place for annual nourishment. So any type of maintenance that has been done has just been, I guess, either screening the sand or cleaning it up from debris. I don't think that there's been there's been nothing to stop or halt the erosion.
Well, I just thought maybe that money would come off of what you're going to spend now anyway.
Is there money earmarked for maintenance, annual maintenance?
But it wouldn't, not any different than the maintenance we would continue doing. There wouldn't be any maintenance savings by doing this. We would still maintain it in the same manner in which we do.
So we haven't budgeted any money for sand placement nutrients, because we don't have a permit. So we wouldn't budget.
No, we have not.
We have not budgeted any money for that.
Well, it was never needed either.
Yeah.
Correct.
I have one more quick question.
Yeah.
On Cove 3, why is the cost, it's smaller than the others it look like, why is the cost over double the other two, but the other two?
Yeah, it's actually the amount, because when I say replaced to 2015, it was how much was originally there in 2015.
We lost 70 feet of beach.
Yeah.
It took the biggest.
So why is
On
the
Cove
design
3.
thing that, or what, why did you lose more there?
Well, it's very possible it was overfilled at the time, and
So-
Mother Nature didn't want it there, so she immediately started carving it back. And it wasn't necessarily high water level erosion effects, it was the effect that it was overfilled. And that's why you can see it pulled back as much as it did. If we look at the comparisons between 2005 and 2016, toward that back beach, you've lost 7 feet of vertical elevation of sand. That's
From a
very
rec-
significant. So it adds up to a very large amount.
And from a recreational standpoint, that was where we did sand volleyball, which was used pretty often. I mean, it was used every day, and we had leagues, and there was drops, so we can't do that anymore.
Right.
But right now, we're not talking about that Cove 3.
No.
That's another time, for another discussion, another day.
Or just on the dynamics of the sand.
Yeah.
As you're putting nutrient sand back in, is that washing out into the lake, or is it building up on the bottom of the cove?
The torpedo sand, or what's existing there is called torpedo
Start with
sand?
what's existing.
Okay, so the presentation that I gave 2 weeks ago showed that we're doing a long-term monitoring study as part of the permit requirement, and we look at cross-sections through each of these coves and offshore. And what you can see is a volume of sand being lost on the inside and a volume being deposited just outside of those breakwaters. So when you're flattening, you're actually pulling that material offshore. Once it's outside of the breakwaters, though, it's in the littoral zone, which means that as we are getting storms, as we typically do out of the northeast, it's pushing that sand away. So it's lost into the system.
It goes south.
It's going south, correct. But your winds and waves are coming out of the north, so that results in a southerly movement.
And Chad, if I may, part of the original permits required the monitoring to make sure that these structures didn't destroy the beaches downstream.
Right.
So the sand going offshore and then moving down is a good thing.
Yeah,
Replenishing.
Yeah.
a little.
But with the high lake waters, they're not having any beaches anyway.
Well,
Right.
Yeah, it's-
Theirs is entering the littoral system as
Yes.
well.
Just out of curiosity, I noticed in Florida, they tend to put a barge out with pumps and just move the sand around.
Hydraulically, yes. And that is allowed in Florida. That currently is not allowed in Illinois. It's considered dredging, and because there is some heavy metals in your soils offshore,
I withdraw the question.
yeah. Not allowed. Beneficial reuse of dredging material, if it is considered clean, has been done most recently in Wisconsin for the first time, and we're looking at it in Illinois and working with DNR to do that. But yeah, it's so much easier in Florida. Used to work there.
Mr. Mayor, that was a great presentation.
Thank you.
That was very informative. Thank you.
Can we make an oral motion to allow the
Yes,
project to move forward?
yes.
Okay.
It's on your agenda.
What do we need to authorize tonight?
So, do we need to authorize the start project to move forward? What are you looking for tonight?
If you are in agreement with the process of moving forward with expanding to at least the 2015 survey, what I will do is put together costs to do the engineering work and send that over to you for review and approval. And then we will start working on the drawings and call DNR and Army Corps of Engineers and get on their list for a pre-application meeting.
I mean, I'm comfortable going forward with the recommendation.
Right, and that was
Yeah.
my first question.
Yeah.
Are you
Mhm.
comfortable going forward with Margaret's recommendation?
So, what is that exactly? We're going back to 2015?
Well,
Or
we're doing
what
this-
was your recommendation? You had a few things.
Yeah, we're doing the 40-foot build-out with the bird's eye in the interpretive cove,
Okay.
and the more targeted 40-foot build-out with the torpedo and the bird's eye in the swimming cove.
And what are we doing with the last part, the south?
Nothing,
We're not
because
doing-
we will not get an emergency approval to do anything at this time.
Okay, then.
Well, let me just ask Margaret another question. I'm sorry. Do we need to reach out to the contractors and suppliers at this point saying, reserve time for us?
That would be done in September as well.
So we don't need to do that today?
No. What we would want to do is confirm, well, I would call out a few more quarries to make sure we're getting the best price on this, because only 3 responded to me and I contacted 8. And then we would start to call contractors. Some are just going to be too busy and tell me they can't do it. If you have anyone that you have worked with in the past, I can call them first. So I would need a list of people from you. And if not, that's fine. We have a number of contractors. But this is not very difficult work. It really means a man with a machine, man or a woman with a machine to like push it out, and to just do the surveying work. So
But didn't we use
many upland contractors.
Yeah, didn't we
can
use
do this
Keno
work.
for the
I
work?
think it was Keno that we
Okay.
used.
So we can call them. Now, I'm hopeful that DNR will not require a turbidity barrier, because that will require a more specialized contractor to put it out there. But using that bird's eye, there's less fines in it, and therefore a turbidity barrier will likely not be needed. They don't stay out there anyway. They're pointless.
I have 2 suggestions. Number one, it looks like we're going to have 400 trucks coming into this area or something, so I think that we need to immediately reach out to the city to notify them this will be going on, because I'm sure they're going to want some type of plan regarding getting the trucks in and out of there. So let's get ahead of that one. And number 2, I believe we had a notice list for the surrounding neighbors to keep them updated with regard to when we did the original construction. I think we should reach out to the neighbors as soon as possible, let them know that this work's going to be done this fall, so that they're not shocked and all of a sudden they feel like there's an invasion of semis coming into the area. So I bring them into the loop as soon as possible.
So I guess my main thing, Brian, is I'm not sure with the swimming beach if we go with the targeted or the larger build-out. I'm still not real I'm not sold either way yet.
Okay.
What is everyone's opinion of that? Because that's something we need to decide now, right?
Well, it's not right now. Right now, you have about another week or so
Okay.
before we're really jumping into grading and drawing this out, because we have all the more recent surveys, so we're ready to hit the ground running. And it really will only take us a few weeks to get those drawings.
Let me take a stab at trying. I think what I understand is reason why she's recommending the targeted versus doing the whole band is we have natural areas near the breakwaters we're trying to protect, and if we did the whole band, then we're jeopardizing those natural areas.
Okay, right.
And number two, as the lake waters change, that actually should naturally more sand should accumulate along the sides. Instead of us putting sand in there, more sand would do that, and also to protect it so it doesn't get worse, I believe you're recommending that we put the bird's eye all the way up to the breakwater, so we're accomplishing protecting that, but as things evolve down there, it will be able to replenish itself as nature takes its course. However, if it doesn't work, we still have that permit pending
We do.
for nutrients that we'll be able to supplement at a later date.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It allows
Yeah.
for a phase.
As long as it's not, as long
Yeah.
as it's not a permanent decision that
No.
we go with the
We'll monitor
targeted
it.
and then we're
Yeah,
stuck
we'll
with it.
monitor
Okay.
and see how it goes.
I'm okay with
And I
that.
think on your point, the picture that had the yellow here, but not all the way,
Yeah.
the yellow is actually going a little bit further out than it was depicted.
Naturally, we'll do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's going a little bit further out,
Right.
Yeah.
So this darker
feathering out, I guess.
bird's eye would feather out. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And we'll see that all in the grading plans as those get put together.
And actually, I think you said another 20,000, but I believe you said that if you look at that figure, you were doubling the amount of the bird size, so it's another 13,000. So it's not extra another 20,000.
Right. We just saved ourselves 7,000.
All right, okay.
These are swags.
All in now.
Excellent. So it's actually less burning.
Discount.
No, that was, so the question I have is, and I think you too, what is the motion we have to make?
Would it be a motion to approve the recommendation by Margaret and to approve Margaret moving forward with drawings and getting it out?
Yep. If you're comfortable with these costs that are estimates, then that's the path we're going to head down.
Okay, can I get a motion from one of you
I so move.
to approve the work Margaret described, the recommendations Margaret described, and give Margaret permission and authority to begin moving forward with drawings and reaching out to contractors?
Yeah, that's what I approved. I moved.
So that's-
I'll second it.
And before we vote on it, curious, how are we paying for it?
That's what I was going to ask.
I'd like to know if there's a cap on it too.
Yeah. How are we paying for this?
So we'll use our available capital.
Do we have to amend the budget?
Our
Yeah.
capital projections are way under for this year. So if this were to happen this year, there would be no need to amend the budget. It would just be a matter of moving priorities. You know,
Is this being the 5-year capital plan? So we would say to be moving priorities in the 5-year capital plan for
Yeah, I
this
mean,
year?
it would affect,
It would just be a-
it'll affect the totality of our capital plan because we'll be, the monies that we may not be spending this year in other capital projects we'll be spending on this. And those projects that were deferred will still be in the capital budget. So, I mean, it'll affect our long-range funding for other projects that we want to accomplish.
So we can discuss that through our green plan.
This is a high priority.
Yeah, I got it. I'm just asking. It's just asking.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it'll be built into that funding model.
Okay. All right, thank you.
We have a pending motion.
I'll call the question. Oh, you have a
I
question?
second. No, that
Okay.
was,
Any other conversation, any other discussion on the motion? Mitch, can you call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein?
Aye.
Commissioner Grossberg?
aye.
Commissioner Flores-Weiskopf?
Aye.
Vice President Ruttenberg?
Aye.
President Kaplan?
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you very much. Enjoy
Very
your trip back to
thorough.
Madison.
Safe trip home for
You do make sand interesting.
Yeah. Bring some red brats back from the
Next time?
Space
All
brats,
right.
yeah.
Next time I come, I'll bring some curds and
Yeah, okay.
red brats.
I'm up for that.
I'm thinking spotted cow.
We had spotted cow.
Oh, that's
yeah.
true. You can't get it.
Can't get that done.
I can get arrested.
Margaret, thank you.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
Okay, new business, Parks Foundation update. Mr. Roseborough.
I just have a few things that we have been awarded a grant from Yay, which is being rolled out. I don't know the exact word. It's kind of being rolled into the Community Foundation, if I understand that correctly. Was it 3,500?
2,500.
2,500? Oh, the original one might have been.
Original 35.
Okay. So that was very nice. The FYI, which is our program that we're creating that's separate from Smile, which benefits Highland Park and Highwood kids for their swimming programs, is starting to see kids. There are some logistical issues with getting the kids signed up at the right times and getting them there to their swim lessons. But we're starting to, does anybody else have
We have an update on that. We're basically sold out for the first three first three classes, and I think
Fantastic.
both sessions will probably sell out.
Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah, the 6 to 12-year-olds are completely full right now.
Okay.
And then the 3 to 6-year-olds, we have a few slots left in both the first and second session, but we're working closely with both New Astro and 112. So.
Yeah, it literally exploded.
Yeah,
After that
it seemed like we had to just turn a couple of the right keys
Yeah.
at 112 and with Maestro and the things, and then
Yep.
great. That's great to hear because that's
I don't
very good.
understand. So you're saying it's filled by
Yes.
the Highwood?
We created a special day and time, the aquatic staff did, for specifically the FYI program.
Wow.
And so
That's terrific.
those classes are filling up. Some have filled up already
That's great.
with those
Yeah.
specifics. So,
and
yeah,
that's all within the week because last
Yeah.
week it was
Uh-huh.
like we have a couple dribbling
Right.
in, but there's a
the
lot
next
of
day,
problems.
it was
Oh, that's great.
really
Awesome. A big
ironic,
cheer to
so.
Bob Bernstein has really been humping on it on that one. So thank you
Very
too,
good.
also to our staff. And then we spent the majority of the meeting talking about board strategies to create the board in more dynamic, different types of board members and more. So we even talked about possibly investing some of our funds in that process, and there was some talk about, well, do we invest in having kind of a consultant come in and help us with this? So that I think there's some agreement that something needs to be done, but there's no agreement with exactly what needs to be
Board
done.
members are there?
Well, I think
Good day.
You count on 2 fingers?
And no,
on 2 hands, you mean? No, we have
Oh,
at least 5.
yes, 2
Okay,
fingers
you're at 5, okay.
Yeah.
How many are you looking for?
We'd like to have a dozen,
at least.
Well, what
To
what if we have
15.
at the most?
probably 9. So there's been attrition, and we've lost some really good members. They get busy in their lives. I mean, I understand it.
Yeah, and
You
they're
know.
2-year terms, right?
Yeah, we're not even really talking terms.
Yeah.
We're like, if you're in, you're kind of in for life until you're not. But yes, I mean, we have bylaws and things like that. So,
Yeah.
right. And so
Yeah.
Good.
And I think we've already, amazingly, it was a good meeting apparently, but I think Liz got word that Bob has recruited maybe 2 or 3 more people already.
that's
From
great.
a list that we generated to have him.
Yes,
contact.
there were 4 or 5 names named out there, and so hopefully that this is it. Now, people get a hold of it. We have to have a way to get them engaged. So to really feel like we are heading somewhere strongly, but my general thought is that if we can appeal to people's sense of donating a couple of years to service that will make them happy with their lives. That's kind of the way I've approached the people. That the service, the act of giving, makes your life more worthwhile, and so that's the way I've been approaching the people.
Time commitment.
It's 1 meeting a month. They usually last. It's on Tuesdays. It's on the 3rd Tuesday in between our meetings here, and. So we're looking for all different people that have all kinds of different skills, different demographics, people with young children, seniors, people with marketing and related skills would be very, very helpful because we are at the cusp of something great, but we really do need at least 7 to 10 more people in there so it doesn't, you know how boards are, it falls on the same people and then people get busy and then they can't do it anymore. So that's what we spent the majority of the time working on. but it's this FYI is a really cool separate thing. Smile, we're always in on Smile, so having this other thing is really great.
Thank you. All right, Brian, Director's Report.
Yes.
Could you make one, please?
Yes. So, just a few event updates. If you enjoy yoga, you will not want to miss Goat Yoga. Our first original Goat Yoga classes will be held on September 14th. So you can be one with nature, one with goats, and one with your soul. It's a 35-minute yoga class and a goat happy hour. So we have.
Are you going to turn beet red like you are now?
What time's it at?
There are two sessions, one at 11 a.m. to 12:30. That one is sold out.
Okay.
There's a second one from 1 to 2. I believe it starts at 1, might be to 2:30. And I think there's 13 spots available.
So where is it?
possibly. It is. No.
Community Park.
Community Park, yeah.
Oh,
And it is rain or shine, so there is a tent if it does rain. So, and that's it. With that, also our annual Autumn Fest at Highland Nature Center. As some of you noticed, we had our honey harvest, and we had a very plentiful honey harvest. Over 1,000 pounds was harvested this year. It was a great year. The bees were very aggressive and made lots of honey, so that was great. So our Autumn Fest is on September 20th from 4 to 7 p.m. We do have wristbands available in advance, $10 for adults, $15 for children, and that's unlimited hay rides and other rides that are there, and then they take a pumpkin home with them. You can also buy them at the festival for $5 more. And that's the majority of what we have. Oh, Touch a Truck, our annual Touch a Truck. We come out to Sunset Park and look at the many different trucks that we have on display. That is from 10 a.m. to noon. It is a free event on Saturday, September 7th.
Okay. Thank you. Any other board comments? Does anyone from the public want to address the board on anything that we discussed?
Can I
tonight?
just say one thing before? Sorry about that. I just want to tell Cal and Brian that I have a potential person that's interested in the golf. I just wanted to get that out there before I forgot. That I met a guy at the course at the thing that you had to rush away from, who's interested in being in any kind of golf advisory committee. So I just wanted to.
Brian Rollins.
Yep.
It was one of the guys that we were with.
Oh, good.
He's, yeah, one of them was a
What was
Highland
his
Park
name?
resident.
Yeah.
I got
Okay.
all of his
he
contact.
must be in the foundation. Rub him
I
in.
know. I did ask him that. He's a pharmacist, and he works late on Tuesdays.
So change your meeting now.
Sorry now. That's not up to
Other
me.
guy.
I'm just a messenger.
We'll time it somehow.
All right. Anything else from the board?
Well, it's open to the public.
Right.
Well,
Okay,
well, just in case.
okay.
Why you watch yourself?
Not nothing for me.
Okay. Anyone from the public wish to address the board on anything we discussed tonight or anything? Yes, ma'am.
Anything not discussed?
Yes.
Isn't, okay.
Anything, as long as it's.
Just state your name. Yeah.
Why don't you come up here, so we're on tape.
All right.
They would appreciate if you speak into the microphone.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
I am Maureen Hammonds, and I am the Commodore of the North Shore Yacht Club. And I am bringing you greetings from the North Shore Yacht Club. We've had a lot going on lately. On August 17th, we had our first ever Venetian night. And we had no idea how it was going to work out. But it all worked out really well. And we had, I don't know, maybe 200 spectators there, in addition to the about 85 volunteers, which included police, fire department, public works, and very thankfully to you all, the Park District. We want to thank you for your cooperation with that. We had your crack boat ramp staff there making it all happen, so thank you very much. A few days after that, we had 3 days of MABUS dive and rescue training. We had 2 days with the Sheriff's Department of Cook County training people, and then there was a day of the Highland Park Fire Department hosting the Suburban Division III MABUS training going on, and we were invited, North Shore Yacht Club members were invited to observe and learn about how all that happens so that we are better and able to offer whatever kind of assistance and support that we can help to just help keep things safe down at the lakefront. And again, the Park District made all that possible. Thank you. Then right after that, we had 4.5 days of beach hazards, which we all know. And as of last night, the beach looked like a lumberyard. There was like a staircase bumping up against the dock and an 8x8 section of decking and logs and all kinds of things out there, and the Jersey barriers were out in the middle of the ramp. And we have our annual regatta coming up this weekend, so I got in touch with Rob and I was like, man, we may, if this doesn't get fixed, we're going to have to cancel our regatta because we got all these boats coming in from different states and all over the place. And I was down there at 12:15 today, and the place is immaculate. I want to thank you all so much. The dock got fixed, the sand ramp got relayed, and the big Jersey barriers are in place, and the beach is pristine. So thank you. Speaking of our regatta, I would like to invite you all, staff and board members, to come by this weekend. We'll be there Saturday and Sunday. Sunday late afternoon, we'll have a barbecue, so stop by for a burger or a beer. We'd love to see you down there and see what's going on. We're also very interested, of course, in partnering with you, continuing that partnership going forward to increase safety down there and maintain access for both motorized and human-powered watercraft and keep things alive down at the lakefront. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, can I get a motion to go into closed session pursuant to the following sections of the Open Meetings Act? Section 2C5, the purchase or lease of real estate, including discussion on whether a certain parcel of property should be acquired. Section 2C6, the setting of a price for sale or lease of property owned by the district. Section 2C11, litigation against or on behalf of the district when the district finds that an action is probable. In Section 2C21, the discussion of minutes lawfully proposed under the Act, whether for the purposes of approval of said minutes or conducting the semi-annual review of the minutes as set forth in Section 2.06 of the Act.
So move.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Mitch, can you call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein?
Aye.
Commissioner Grossberg?
Aye.
Commissioner Flores Weiskopf?
Aye.
Vice President Ruttenberg?
Aye.
President Kaplan?
Aye. Sure, we're in closed session at 7:56.
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you. That was a lot of sand.
On.
Yes. You've been sandbagged.
Yeah.